So for a long time now, there's been this grand concept of having some sort of camera system that is connected to the internet in some way and has access to apps. You know, this ability to take photos, edit them with apps, post them onto social media, share them right away. And of course, this is a huge benefit. We use this all the time nowadays with smartphones, but there have been many attempts in the past by manufacturers to make photo modules that stick on the front of your phone and give you better image quality, and then you can use the phone to edit it, or even cameras that try to do this in camera. Things like the Samsung Galaxy NX, for example, or the Zeiss ZX1, and unfortunately, a lot of these systems have largely failed. I mean, this is why the smartphone is such a powerful and popular tool in the hands of everybody, because it's convenient, but there's still the allure of having maybe better manual controls, the ability to change lenses and get the characteristics of different glass and have more natural looking depth of field. This is something that still eludes a lot of smartphones, and that's where camera intelligence comes in, because this is the second attempt at a camera that interfaces directly with the smartphone, but gives you a micro four thirds sensor and the interchangeability of the micro four thirds lens mount. Now, when this first came out, it's no understatement, this created a huge storm, and that's largely based on how the Caira camera interfaced with AI photographic technology. And I want to talk about what the ramifications were of that and where the Caira camera sits now. And I also want to do some of this camera that not a lot of people have done, and that is take it in the field and actually test it, because that's what we love to do. I'm Chris Niccolls, this is PetaPixel. This is a very interesting camera, and there's a lot to talk about. So to give you guys a little backstory here, when the Caira camera was first announced and then found its way into the hands of a few influencers to get its sort of official first review, this was happening just months after the release of Google's brand new Nano Banana generative AI photo tool. And what this tool basically does is scour the internet, take legitimate artwork, steal it all, and then, you know, you can just generate whatever the hell you want. And I mean, the use of it is dubious. It damages creators and their hard work. For the most part, photographers are really against this technology, and I think they should be. But what was unique about the Caira camera was that it was seamlessly integrating Nano Banana's access into its UI interface. So anytime that you take photos on the camera, this is important to get across. The camera itself, the photo taking part, is completely separate from any sort of generative AI. I mean, there's computational technology here I want to talk about. There's neural networks to handle things like better autofocus, white balance. This is something that all cameras do. Nothing wrong with that in my eyes. It then transfers those photos over to your phone, and your phone then works as the separate interface to things like the internet, where you can access things like Nano Banana, for example. And so look, the idea of this first implementation was that you would have the photos on your phone, you'd press a button, it would seamlessly connect you to the cloud-based servers for Nano Banana, upload your photos, and then you could use prompts. You could just speak to the phone and make changes to the photographs or generate all sorts of stuff. And you know, if Camera Intelligence, the company behind Caira, was hoping that you'd use this AI tool to do some small enhancements, maybe change the overall feel or color tone, maybe get rid of some distractions, stuff that we do on our smartphone all the time and take for granted, they were sorely mistaken, because of course what this opened you up for was doing all sorts of crazy AI generation. And you can definitely check out some of those earlier reviews that first came out to see a lot of that. Unfortunately, I think that actually overshadowed the actual concept of the camera entirely, and it made Camera Intelligence change their entire update structure for how they were going to handle this going forward. Okay, so does this new update on the UI of the Caira camera still access Nano Banana? Make no mistake, yes, it absolutely does still access this generative AI tool, but how it's implementing is very different. So the Caira camera's latest update gets rid of the prompt entirely. That's gone. And what Camera Intelligence is doing now is giving you a series of curated filter effects and looks and changes, still using this Nano Banana engine, but not giving you prompt control, you know, to do whatever you want to do with it. And I feel like their goal going forward is to keep this more structured. But does this mean that they could at any moment go back and open the prompt-based AI tool? Yes, absolutely they could. But this does give us an interesting opportunity to test this camera as it's intended to right now. So as you can see today, we got this beautiful day, and I'm gonna mention the date, although it's not something that I normally do, but it's actually Good Friday, 2026, and I'm mentioning that because first off, the Caira has changed substantially since its announcement, as we've already talked about, and it's gonna change a lot more going forward, and that's kind of part of the nature of this camera that I wanna discuss. So this did originally start as a Kickstarter, and these models are starting production. They're going out to their backers now, and this camera is gonna go into full production as it is. And that's why we really wanted to take a look at the Caira now. Because look, I'm going to be reviewing this camera today as a production camera because that's what it is. And Camera Intelligence understands that we are reviewing this as a fully reviewable camera right now. But I cannot still help but feel like in a lot of ways this camera is pre-production. There's some things that just don't feel finalized, some things that feel fiddly, some things with the build. I'm going to share all these things with you because I think the real key to whether this is going to be the right product for you or not is if you feel you can put trust in this company going forward that they're going to update this in interesting and thoughtful ways. They seem to have a very passionate team, and it is a very small team, and so it will take time for this camera to gain its refinement, but I still want you to understand what this tool is about and whether it's right for you. Okay, so we're going to leave all that generative icky AI stuff for later. We will get to that, but I do want to evaluate this as a camera attachment tool, adding this micro four thirds sensor to your iPhone. And it is important to note, this is only for iPhone users. But I'm curious about this as a camera because I've used these large sensor attachments onto phones before. I've reviewed them and they've always been jank and problematic. So how does this work? Well, logistically, the first thing I want to get across, this has the 12 megapixel sensor that you would find in the Panasonic GH5S. That sensor is not high resolution, but it does have a fast readout, which makes sense for the application that we have here, where it's transferring your phone quickly using electronic shutter and adding a lot of filters to it. Okay, so this camera itself, how does this contraption work and attach to everything? Well, first off, let's talk about the body. I mean, this is a very straightforward camera. There's not a lot on it. This hard aluminum grip at first looks very scary, but it's actually surprisingly comfortable to hold. I was shocked and amazed. There's also a thumb grip on the back, but that's not always functional. I'll explain why. You do have a double stage shutter here, so you can half press to focus and then all the way to commit, and actually it feels quite nice. There's also a cold shoe up here, so you can attach like a little light, or you could put on mics and stuff like that. On the topic of mics, you will also see a legacy 3.5 millimeter mic jack, but so far it's not really supported. It's not really working. Camera Intelligence suggests that you actually do microphones through the USB-C port, which you'll find right here on the side. You've also got your on-off button and you've got your lens release for the lens mount. And that's basically it. Now, the USB-C port, this is how you recharge the internal battery in the camera. This is also how you access the internal storage if you want to download stuff off the camera there. It does not connect to the phone via cable at all. That's all going to be done through a Wi-Fi interface. So we're going to talk about that in a bit. The last thing I want to say though here is how it connects to your phone physically is via MagSafe. Now the magnet's nice and strong, okay? I mean, that's a good thing, but as you can see here, it doesn't prevent rotation, and that's really annoying and it's fiddly, and you kind of have to keep your phone sort of level. Also, I've got the iPhone 17 Pro Max, physically large, which means I can't use that thumb hold, and all of my important stuff like shooting and my color filters and all that stuff is here right under my thumb, so I can't even really hold it with my thumb like on the grip there. So that's kind of tricky. I gotta be honest, a little bit fiddly, and it doesn't feel confidence inspiring. And I also want to touch on lenses because this is by far one of the most exciting aspects of a piece of equipment like this, is getting access to that whole library of micro four thirds lenses. And I mean, glass is all about character, it's about bokeh, it's about depth of field, it's about color rendition. I mean, all of these things transfer through to the phone, and that's something you don't really appreciate with smartphone cameras and optics on their own. Now, I've brought a whole series of lenses. I mean, I've got Panasonic, OM, Olympus, we're gonna try a whole bunch, but right now I've got the excellent Leica DG Vario Elmar 12 to 60 millimeter, one of my favorite lenses, f2.8-4. This is autofocusing great so far on the camera, no problems, and it's also working with the image stabilization. So potentially these should give you the full functionality of the lens that you put on it. I'm also happy to report that the Wi-Fi interface between the camera itself and the phone seems to be quite reliable. So far in my testing, I really haven't had any issues with it dropping out. I haven't had to retry connections very often to get it connect. It's actually been working really well. But there are some other issues when just shooting around on the street, okay? So this Caira camera has an internal battery, about 5,000 milliamps, about the same as a smartphone, should last you the entire day. It also has 64 gigs of internal storage, but there's no like SD card slot or anything like that. It's gonna be storing files on the camera as well as transferring it to your phone's gallery. And when it comes to like power saving and how we're going to handle this. Well, it does have a functionality where you can put it to sleep after like a minute or 15 minutes, and you can also set a power off time, right, to just shut off completely. This is going to be important because the on-off switch takes forever, not only to turn the camera off, but also on again. So if I was trying to capture something on the street and the camera's not turned on, forget about it, right? I'm going to try to kind of just let this go into sleep mode for most of the day so I can activate it quickly and keep shooting rapidly. Okay, so I mean, this is one of the nicest screens I've ever used on a camera. I mean, there's no EVF, unfortunately, but hey, I'll forgive her that because, yeah, the iPhone's got a great screen. Also, I want to talk about the autofocus on here, okay? Because right now I'm focusing on the Calgary Tower behind all of these flags, and you do have a single point that you can just move around touchscreen on the phone, and it works quite well, and it will focus where I want it to focus in that regard. So far, there's no tracking or continuous autofocus, although that is something that Camera Intelligence says that they are working on for the future. But I do want to say something very important about here on autofocusing, because I've tested it quite a bit now with faces and stuff, and the detection's not quite great. I mean, there's things we take for granted now on smartphones and, you know, cameras like Nikon's, Canon's, and Sony's where you'll get that eye detection right to the eye. Well, this is still bringing me back to setting a point on someone's face and getting tip of the nose focus or eyelash focus. It just doesn't quite have the refinement yet. So for something like this, a tower behind flags, great. But for people and moving subjects, it's still not quite there. The focusing is basically using a contrast detect system. I can feel it going through steps to try to acquire focus, but to its credit, it's predictable and fairly quick, and it's quiet. What I do like though is the shutter is very responsive. So when I take a shot, it fires. Once it's got focus, it's nice and quick, no delay. I don't feel like I'm missing out on any shots or anything like that. So I dig that. Now there are a series of very nice color filters built into this, and I want to make this clear. This is not generative AI. This is actually computational photography and neural networks built into the camera doing this. So you actually have some really nice color filters, and you know, you got neutral, you got vibrant, you've got sort of a film look, a chrome look, a gold look, a black and white. I mean, these are fun, and it's got a really nice interface, just a circle, and if you push the wheel up or down, you change contrast, and then left or right, you change sort of like white balance, mildly, colder or warmer tone. This actually is very straightforward, very intuitive, and actually really effective. Now, once I get that tuned in, the Caira does also give me a healthy amount of manual exposure and control, but I don't always love the implementation. Anyways, the first page that you're going to have is going to have your basic manual functionality. So you actually have manual focus. I can click on this and then slide the slider. I also get aperture control, and of course it does read the aperture properly from the lens that's mounted. I get shutter speed control, and because this is an electronic shutter, I can go up to some insanely fast speeds to control any sort of excess light. And then I don't get ISO, but I get what they're calling gain, which is very similar kind of structure. But basically I can crank this up or down to change the overall exposure, and just like ISO, it will add more noise the higher I go. On top of that, I get distortion, I get saturation, I get color temperature, and I get tint. So you actually have a healthy amount of creative control over the color and the contrast of your shots. Now, as far as the implementation of this whole control system, there's good and there's bad, okay? I mean, on the good side, the vertical slider is very straightforward. A lot of people from smartphone experience are going to understand how a vertical slider works to make things brighter or darker, for example. Then to actually change settings from automatic to manual, you double click on it. So if I click once on the aperture, it goes red. That means I'm in manual control. If I click it again, it goes green, and that's back into automatic. I will say, though, that the touch controls in general are a little bit fiddly. Like, I often have to press things 2 or sometimes even 3 times to get them to register. If I'm taking my time casually, it's no big deal, but if I was trying to grab a shot quickly, it would be very stressful and kind of unreliable. On top of that, I do get manual control of shutter, aperture, and gain, but I don't have any sort of exposure compensation. So I can take a look at a shot and say, I want that darker than the what the meter suggests, or brighter than what the meter suggests, and there's no way to do that. Even if I take one of these controls out of manual, say aperture for example, it's still automatically going to match everything with the other settings. So the only way to override the meter is to actually turn everything to full manual and do it myself in a very old school way. I don't really have an issue with that, but I could see a lot of beginners finding that quite frustrating or confusing. I just got to talk about this again because I've been playing with it here. I mean, the manual focus implementation is awesome. Like that little split prism rangefinder, and then I can push halfway and have it magnify as well. This is what the Leica M EV1 should have implemented on its screen. Would have been awesome, but it works great here. One thing that doesn't work great though is hot swapping lenses. Hot swapping is great in a polyamorous relationship, but it's not great on this camera. It's a bug, and they're working on fixing that. But if I swap lenses, sometimes it kicks into a different option, doesn't let me go back to autofocus. That's kind of annoying. And so there's a lot of actual bugs here in this OS that we just kind of got to tough through right now, and hopefully they fix it in the future. So I want to get this low angle shot, but I'm like straining my neck to see the screen because it doesn't rotate. But actually, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So I can just attach this. The MagSafe doesn't have anything to do with connectivity other than the physical locking of the two together. I can take this off, and this would be really cool for selfie shots, for low angles where I can just comfortably see my frame. Oh, that's great. And I can just, ooh, a little disorienting, but I have to remember not to move the phone. It's the camera that does it all, but that's actually a really nice feature. I could see that being useful in a studio situation or product photography setup. So yeah, that's a nice option. All right, so here's a perfect example of where something like this shines compared to a smartphone, okay? Because I want to use this little 12mm Panasonic lens, which is working great, get my focus, purposely crank down the aperture to f/16, the tightest, and get a really nice sunstar. And that's something I can't do on a phone. I mean, I have to actually ironically go into like AI generative and ask for a sunstar or something, right? So this is nice that I can do it optically with the lens, and that is kind of the benefit here, is getting to use actual glass. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Woo! It's just too bright again. I mean, I don't like the way it exposes, so I'm constantly going in and setting everything to manual and darkening things down a little bit with a faster shutter speed to get some more contrast and depth to the color. But it's just fiddly. It's not fun. It's fiddly, and the touchscreen interface isn't that responsive, so that just exacerbates the issue. So I mentioned earlier that this uses the GH5S's sensor. Now this is a 12 megapixel multi-aspect ratio 4/3 sensor. And this actually does some interesting stuff here on this. Not only does it have a faster read speed, which we've talked about, but it does give you different aspect ratios you can shoot while still retaining pretty good detail. So this will actually do a 17:9 cinematic ultra wide screen, giving you about 8.8 megapixels. You can do a 4:3 aspect ratio, just over 10 megapixels. And then if you do 3:2 aspect ratio, that gives you your highest at 11 megapixels. The UI does warn that if you shoot 3:2 ratio, you might get a little bit of vignetting and stuff with some lenses, but so far I haven't seen that to be a problem. We also have some pretty nice photo formats here that we can record in. So I've got JPEGs, of course, and these will actually embed in HDR profiles. So when I put these on my smartphone on an HDR screen, I can get it to map that and actually give me that extra dynamic range. Another cool thing is DNGs. This shoots both DNGs or DNG Plus, which is their compressed DNG. This is lossless. It will take a little bit more time if you're processing files in the UI, but it does save space, and that is important. Now, there is 64 gigs of internal storage. Your photos go there, your JPEGs and RAWs. It'll also send that to the phone, and it'll show up in your iPhone gallery. So I got my JPEGs and RAWs in there as well. So all in all, it's quite convenient. So we've had a nice day, been wandering around for about 3 hours or so now. Battery life, first off, this was fully charged when I left the house, and I have been leaving it pretty much on the whole time because the on-off time again is killer. And I'm down to about 51%, so I could still shoot quite a few more photos, but it's not like I took hundreds today. From a shooting standpoint, from a comfort level, it is kind of an awkward device to use. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, guys. Like, sticking this on here and shooting, I can't really hold it as comfortably as I'd like. I've got this strap, but it's all sort of dangling. To its credit, my phone hasn't fallen on the ground yet. I thought it would, but this is actually kind of a chunky tool, right? I mean, the convenience of a smartphone is completely gone when you jam this on here. And now we're talking about interchangeable lenses, and it feels far more like a system camera, just a kind of awkward one to hold and use. It's got a fair bit of weight to it as well. But we got some samples. I think we're gonna head home now. We're gonna take a look at it, and yes, we're gonna talk about all the dreaded AI stuff that we can do to it afterwards. All right, so we've gotten into the studio. Let's talk about the Nano Banana AI features that we have in this phone, which are largely toned down from what we had before. Okay, so one of the generative AI features that I do want to test out is the studio background generative fill. And I do think this is a legitimate use case where this product will be very useful. If you're a small business owner, let's say hypothetically, your boss at the fly shop says, Chris, you need to sell this Micus spay reel VR design, Vladimir Radchenko, beautifully made in the Ukraine. And you're like, okay, well, I don't have a studio setup. First thing you do need is a proper light. You can't get around that because the AI is not going to touch the subject. It's got to look good. So I'm using my Westcott L120B continuous light, plenty of power through this 2x3 foot rapid box switch, and this is going to give me that nice soft light and really show off that silver detailing. But look at my background. I got an exercise bike. There's yoga stuff in the background, and I'm putting this on top of a fireplace. I mean, this is not a professional setup, but I can take it here on the shot. I can run it through the AI, and what it's going to do is that. Look, I'm balancing this with a rock. A damn rock is holding this reel up in place, and it totally gets rid of that, puts a nice counter shadow on the bottom there, and this is now fit for selling on a website. This is a very nice use case. So you have to have the right light. The Westcott L120B, I love it for any sort of studio work. It's got great clean color and nice soft light. You can find this at fjwestcott.com or click the link in the description below to get the same setup for yourself. That is why we love Westcott. They are PetaPixel's preferred lighting gear partner. So that actually worked quite well, and I could see a legitimate use case where that would be very useful for a small business owner. Now, the other ones that are integrated here that are also pretty extreme, and we call them transformations, removing clutter in the background. I mean, this is always effective. We've seen this in lots of other smartphones, and honestly, I don't have a problem with that because that's something that I would do in Lightroom myself. The other one that's kind of strange is redirecting somebody's eyes towards the camera if they're looking away. Now, we tested it here. It does work pretty well, but there's like uncanny valley going on. There's just something funny about the eyes there, but you may or may not find that useful. Largely, the other modes are going to be like lens effects and color filter effects, and some of them are actually kind of fun, like adding anamorphic flare is pretty neat. You know, making things wider angle or fisheye, that's pretty generative. I don't know if I love that, but then some of the color filters can be very nice. Now, golden hour is an interesting example because that's something that I could use quite often. I took a shot of this guy sitting down just enjoying a smoke, and I love the golden hour effect. It's lighting his hair from behind, giving that rim light, nice soft light with directionality. I thought it did a great job. But then Jordan tried to test with his son here, and it put hard shadows across his face, and that wasn't really nice. Now, there's no way to tone these effects down or change like opacity or do another generation right away and, you know, pick from the top 3. You can absolutely just cancel out and try to generate it again, and it will do something slightly different, and you can go through that process. But one of the major downsides that I have to say with this whole thing now, especially compared to a smartphone that has AI tools, is that this is painfully slow. I mean, slow enough that it takes the fun out of it. Sometimes I'm waiting 30, 40, 50 seconds and it's just not doing it, and that's pretty inconvenient. Now, I should also point out that the resolution on these is fairly low. I mean, you can do the 2K resolution. That's where it takes the most time to generate. That's just over 4 megapixels. You can half that to 1K, and you basically half those megapixels, and you'll half the time it takes to generate the files. But again, you know, like the resolution is not going to be great for anything except maybe social media usage. And that brings me to my next thing is like, look, I'm no fan of the prompt-based AI tool, right? I really didn't like what that stands for. I don't like what it does ethically to photography. But I will say that this new revision, this pullback, as it were, feels a lot like just fun collective filter effects. And it doesn't really feel like much more than that. You know, I mean, doing things like 1960s 35 millimeter film, it's going to drop saturation. You're going to get an analog frame and a color overlay. Like, that's not super generative stuff, which maybe is part of the solution, right? If people are pushing back so hard on the AI generation, maybe this gives you more of a curated, toned down kind of approach. At the same time, though, it's kind of weird because I feel like now I'm missing out on some of the more powerful applications or be able to take creative control to use Nano Banana in ways that I might find more interesting. The only other thing that's worth noting in the sort of AI generative module is the assistant tool, and this will basically just look at your photograph and then make some suggestions about how you could compose this differently. We've seen this on other things as well. A lot of smartphones have this too, and it'll just say, oh, maybe next time you should go lower, and maybe try changing the colors. I'm like, it's not going to do any sort of generative AI to your photo. It's just going to make these suggestions. And what is interesting is when you go into the info on your photos, you can not only see all the suggestions that the assistant made, so you can, I guess, learn from them for future use, but it will also show you all of the AI generative stuff that was added to the photograph as well. So it kind of keeps track of all the things that you've done to it. So this brings me to a bit of an AI conundrum, and I want to talk about this later on. So let's just keep going on here while we're talking about image quality and get into some of the computational photographic effects that have been added very recently to this version of the Caira, because this stuff is quite compelling. So we've long talked about how computational photo effects, where you're stacking multiple images and doing beneficial things with them, is a great tool. We love this in a lot of Micro Four Thirds camera. Olympus/OM system would of course be the one that's most advanced in this. I love their live ND tools and the ability to add resolution and stuff like that. And Panasonic has also been doing this in a lot of their cameras. And by stacking these multiple images, we can up the resolution, we can reduce noise, we can increase dynamic range. These are all great things. And this is all powerful stuff that we appreciate in every smartphone that we own as well. Stacking of images is a really cool tool, and I wish we would see more cameras do it. So when we found out that the Caira does do this in one of its modes, it was very compelling. I do have to point out though that the computational effects on this camera are definitely in their infancy. So what Camera Intelligence is doing on the Caira is offering a brand new feature called low light. Now you've got your photo mode, your video mode, and now low light. And when you engage low light, it can stack frames. It can stack up to 16 shots. And it's going to decide a lot of stuff in this mode. You can't choose your exposure really. You can't choose how many shots to stack. It will kind of figure that all out intelligently based on the scene and the overall dynamic range and how low the light levels are. But what is cool is it will show you how many files it's stacked, even shows you a buffer so you can see when it still has room to make stacks. And if you shoot too quickly, you might have to then slow down and wait for it to build up a little bit and clear off before you can do some more. What we're seeing with the results though isn't huge, but it is there. So in the low light mode, when you see the stacked shots, we definitely get less noise, but we also tend to get a little bit less detail. Things tend to be a little bit softer. That might just be based on how it's melding all of those images together. I'm not quite sure on that, but we're definitely noticing a little loss of detail, but cleaner shots. So it's kind of a trade-off right now. We expect to see this get better though going down the road. And Camera Intelligence has also said that they're absolutely dedicated to raising the megapixel count, going from 11 megapixels up to like 44 megapixels, for example, doing some stacked high-res shots. Again, we've seen this technology before. It does work well, and so I imagine we'll get similar results from here when they implement it. This is what I will say about the whole Caira experience when it comes to image quality. I'm still enjoying the Micro Four Thirds dynamic range. I can push and pull these files. I like the images that I got out of this. I like being able to see the quality and characteristics of the lenses that I'm choosing to use in the files. And I also will say that I think Camera Intelligence has done a good job with their image pipeline. The colors are nice. I like the filters that they've incorporated into the camera. Not the ones that you use with Nano Banana, but the ones that are in the camera, in the pipeline. I think they've done a really nice job with a lot of those color filters and the ability to customize those. And then if I want more creative control, yeah, I can bring the raw files in and I can play with them, edit them, warm them up, change them. That's all very standard stuff. But if I was really going to do this whole Lightroom path and bother with that, of course I would probably just take a dedicated purpose-built Micro Four Thirds camera, which will give me far more capability than this does. So as a camera reviewer, I love playing with quirky, interesting stuff. It's neat to see what different approaches are and what different companies are trying to do. But I am kind of left struggling with who this camera's for and where its uses are. So I kind of want to just talk through that. Bear with me because it's going to get a little bit muddled, but trying to decide who this camera's for. Well, first, I think we can eliminate serious photographers, and that's fine. That was never the purpose of this camera at all. But if you're a serious photographer that's going to plan on really editing the raw files and wanting to use different lenses, and you like the sort of compact nature, you're going to get a Micro Four Thirds camera. A lot of the modern Micro Four Thirds cameras have decent apps that let you shoot photos on the camera, transfer right to your phone, and then you get a similar level of convenience if you need to really post these on social media right away, right? A lot of these cameras will also have live stream capabilities, so that if you are an influencer that wants to live stream or do video right off the camera, you have those options. Does it take a little bit more work? Does it take a little bit more knowledge to understand that? A little bit more effort to be transferring files and stuff? Sure it does, but if that's what you want to do, you know who you are. So the second use case, and in my opinion, the one that probably has the most clearly defined, useful, legitimate use case purposes would be if you're like in a retail environment and you want to advertise products, put them on your website, take a shot of the front of your store, put it on Instagram. That's where I think a lot of these Nano Banana curated AI tools work really great. Take a shot, get rid of the distractions, take a photo, put it in a studio environment, nice clean white background, add a color filter, throw that in your website. That's where this is very simple, very straightforward, and very useful, and you don't have to have any knowledge to go into editing software and do that. Neither does your staff. It's also cool that you have lenses, so if you're shooting jewelry or something and you want to get a specific macro situation, you can set that up. I mean, there's room to grow because of the fact that you have all of those interchangeable lenses and the inherent better image quality that that larger sensor provides. But then it's the third use case that gives me pause, and this is where I'm having the hardest time understanding exactly what Camera Intelligence is trying to achieve with the Caira camera. Because what they say is their target audience is smartphone users and influencers that feel that they might want a little bit better image quality. They're going to appreciate the larger sensor and the interchangeability of lenses. And I guess that's where I'm a little bit confused, because Caira is also saying that they want this to be as simple a camera experience as possible, as convenient a camera experience as possible. And I can see the intention behind that. Having it hook up with your smartphone, work quite seamlessly, transfer those files over, and then be able to do some interesting stuff to it. But I guess I feel like this. There's a lot of frustrations when using this camera. The overall handling can be quite tricky and a little bit uncomfortable to hold, plus the fact that you now have to juggle extra lenses that you're going to change, a camera bag, all that kind of stuff, that you're already losing the convenience factor the smartphone gives you. On top of that, there's fiddly things like the autofocus not quite being there, not being reliable enough, and then problems with the touchscreen interface, and then certain bugs and stuff. And I know that some of that will get fixed in the future, but we are looking at this production camera as it's coming out on the market right now. And so those things are going to slow people down and maybe add some frustration. On top of that, you do have interesting manual controls here, but that's not what the target audience wants. They want to take a shot and just have it go through quickly, not have to worry about exposure compensation, which is why they don't even have it on the camera yet. And, doing all of these things like computational photography and stuff, I'm not sure they want to make that investment. And then I feel that if I'm going to get into this game of buying interchangeable lenses and the extra cost involved there and then having to carry those all around, I'm going to then want to invest in what focal length does for me visually, and that's going to take some knowledge. And then I'm going to look at, how does aperture work? Because depth of field is a major difference from here on a smartphone. And they're like, so now I got to learn how aperture works. And then I might want to get into the manual controls that are on this thing. Well, then I'm like, why don't I just go and get a proper Micro Four Thirds mirrorless system camera, which will give me a more fun shooting experience, faster capability, better capability, and that'll all make sense. Especially if I consider then that if I'm going to take my file and I'm going to put it into Nano Banana AI and I'm going to do a lot of editing to it, even if it's just the curated stuff here, what was the point? And then when we go back to then thinking about taking these images and using generative AI on them, this actually really throws me for a loop, because if I put myself in the shoes of somebody who doesn't care about the whole photographic process, just wants to get results, I kind of feel cheated that I'm not getting the prompt-based Nano Banana AI tools, which again is horrible because I think it's totally unethical and I do not like it, and I do want it anywhere close to my photographic experience. But for the target audience, that might be fun and useful and creative for them. And I feel like having this curated system of just basically color effects and maybe removing the background stuff, I feel like I'm not getting much out of that. And my smartphone can do all of that now anyways. So then this leaves me in this strange conundrum. I'm like, I kind of want to have those tools back so that I can do more and explore more with that aspect. And then on top of that brings me back to but wait, if I'm going to do all of this generative AI, if they really unlock that in the future again and make it so you can do those things, does it really matter that my source image quality was shot on a certain lens on a Micro Four Thirds sensor? I'm going to obliterate a lot of that uniqueness and image quality anyways when I then put it through generative AI. So it really leaves me in this headspin with this camera of, who is it really going to benefit the most? And so anyways, guys, I don't know what to really do with this. Like Jordan says, I should stop talking now, and I'm probably going to take his advice, but I appreciate you listening to my ramblings on this. This is a tricky one because the original question was, is there merit to finding a way to integrate higher image quality with computational photography into something that's directly connected to the internet so that you have this ability to share things and edit things without having to go and through the process of downloading photos and putting it into separate software and then putting it out on the internet. And I get that utility and I get that convenience, and that's what we really appreciate about the smartphone. So would I use this myself? This Micro Four Thirds camera attachment, would I use this as a way to get Micro Four Thirds image quality into my phone? probably not for me, but I know that this camera is not made for me. If I'm going to go that step, I want to use a camera and enjoy that experience. Otherwise, I feel like modern smartphones give me a lot of that same utility. It's a bit off topic, but I have to say my experience with the Xiaomi 17 Ultra was quite revolutionary for me, because although I know I'm not getting anywhere close to larger format image quality, it was an enjoyable photographic experience, and I felt like a photographer when I was using that smartphone as a camera. That to me was very interesting. I'm not getting that same kind of passion and interest myself here with this product. So if you want that kind of better image quality, that ability to explore different lenses and start playing with depth of field and different looks and different character, great, awesome. This does certainly do that. And I really appreciate that a small team is trying to make something unique and trying to make something that we haven't necessarily quite seen before. But they're really going to have to navigate this sort of roller coaster of how much generative AI we're willing to accept and where that line is and whether you should cross it or not. And I think that's a conversation for another time. I think I'm going to leave it there. But if you guys have questions or comments, definitely leave them below. I foresee that we're going to be answering a lot of these, not only on the PetaPixel podcast, which you can watch on this exact same channel or all your favorite podcasting apps, but also just answering the comments, let you have that feedback and really start a dialogue and conversation. And hey, if you appreciate the work that we do, you can show that by getting yourself a PetaPixel.com membership. You get tons of benefits, discounts. It's really good. You can see them all here. $3 a month, $30 a year. Another way you can consider supporting us is a brand new pop-up that we have as a collaboration with PetaPixel and Harper Finch. They make fantastic clothing, and we have our own line. We've got shirts like the Loca shirt. We've got Film on Location, you cowards. We've got hoodies. You should definitely check it out. And there's really nice discounts right now in the store for those. So definitely support us that way as well. Otherwise, we always appreciate you guys joining us for another episode of PetaPixel. We'll see you soon with more shortly.